And I
So
will stop my
Rachel
screen.
Golden, you are there. Excellent. I'm going to start off with your introduction as you unmute and bring up your screen, please. So Rachel Golden is the Deputy Director of the Sierra Club's Clean Buildings campaign, where she focuses on accelerating the equitable transition off gas to all electric homes and buildings powered by clean energy. She works with campaigners, attorneys, analysts, communication professionals, organizers, and Sierra Club local chapters and volunteers to launch and execute gas-free building campaigns across the United States. Rachel comes to this work with a background in energy policy, having worked on energy efficiency and renewable energy for advocacy organizations, state agencies, and philanthropic organizations. She has a dual master's degree from UC Berkeley in energy resources and public policy. She loves her induction stove and is saving up for some heat pumps. Yay, Rachel!
Thanks so much, Sean. Thanks, everyone. Jana, that was an awesome presentation. I wish I could have been here all day. I have a sick infant at home, so it's been a kind of a hectic day, but I'm happy to be here now with you all, and I hope to catch more of the retreat and training tomorrow as well. Sean, thanks for providing my background. Today I want to talk about the health impacts and the air quality impacts of gas appliances. And I do want to thank many of you on this webinar right now who have actually contributed to this research, especially Sean. Thank you for responding to my thousands of emails over the course of this project. So I know many of us come to zero carbon buildings and electrification from the climate perspective, but what we're seeing is that the health impacts really hit home for people. We're seeing this in polling and in focus groups, and in those who we talk to when we give presentations, and that this health message is really compelling in moving the public who may care more about their personal health than in cutting GHGs from their home. We're also seeing that as we push out more reports and more data on the health impacts of gas, that the gas industry is getting extremely alarmed. So this is another sign that we're onto something here as a community. So all it is to say is that I hope you stay on for this section of the training of the retreat, because the health impacts of gas is really an important topic to get familiar with and to lean into in your work. So please stick with me. I want to share one caveat, and then we'll go to the next slide, is that as Sean said, I'm a campaigns director. I'm not a health expert. So if you have sort of more technical public health related questions, I'm going to refer you to the authors of the reports that I'm going to discuss. So with that, let's go to the next slide. Thank you. So today I want to cover one, the air pollution and health hazards from gas appliances. 2, the good news, which is the benefits of electrification. And then 3, what we need to do about it. So the policy change opportunities at the local, state, and now, thank God, the federal level as well. Much of what I'm going to present today comes from 2 reports which were released, which were published last year. The first is a study by UCLA, which we commissioned, called The Effects of Residential Gas Appliances on Indoor and Outdoor Air Quality and Public Health in California. And then the second report is a report led by Rocky Mountain Institute and Mothers Out Front, which the club and Physicians for Social Responsibility are also engaged in, on the health effects of gas stove pollution. So the first report entailed a ton of modeling. Basically, they modeled and made assumptions around emissions factors for different types of gas appliances, and then modeled it to establish what the indoor and outdoor pollution levels were in homes in California today, and then created a scenario of all electric homes powered by clean energy, and use that to establish what the benefit and the health benefit and air quality benefit of electrification would be. It used also available public health models, and we're also limited by the available public health models as well. And that report only looks at residential pollution from gas. It doesn't include wood or propane or commercial buildings. So the results are conservative. And then the second report is largely, the gas stove report is largely a literature review and a policy piece. It's much shorter, and I encourage you to look at both of them and at the blogs that all of the organizations have released to sort of summarize them. So now it's I'm going to give you sort of like the best of about these reports, the information you need to know. And And since we have, over 100 people on the call with varying backgrounds, I'm going to try to start from the lowest common denominator. So some of this might be a review for some of you. So I appreciate your patience. So next slide, please. So first, gas appliances. People spend about 90% of their time indoors, and we don't regulate indoor air quality. There's no state or federal level regulations that protect indoor air quality. And so this means that what we found is that air pollution levels in many homes today would actually be illegal if they were measured outside. Residential gas appliances emit a wide range of pollutants, from carbon monoxide to nitrogen oxides, to particulate matter like PM2.5 and ultrafine particles. And these are all detrimental to human health. So these are some of the pollutants that we're going to go into today. So then the next slide, what I wanted to do was share this table with you to make it really explicit what the health effects are of each pollutant that comes from gas combustion. So you'll see here a column for acute and for chronic health impacts. So acute health effects refer to the impacts that result from immediate exposure to high levels of pollutants, whereas the chronic health effects refer to the impact of sustained or long-term exposure. And the pollutants associated with acute and chronic health effects include respiratory illnesses, cardiovascular disease, and even premature death. So there's very serious impacts from gas combustion. If we go to the next slide, this is likely intuitive to many of you already, but I just wanted to point out before we dig in, is that when we talk about indoor air pollution from gas, this is mostly affected by kitchen appliances like stoves and ovens that are not directly vented outside the house. And then when we talk about outdoor air pollution, this is mostly affected by water heating and furnaces and other gas space heating devices that are directly vented outside. So now let's go to the next slide, and I'm going to focus on some of the appliances directly. So for gas stoves, this has been a big focus. Okay, thanks, Deborah. I see you share the same chart. Great. So for gas stoves, use of gas cooking appliances, results in very hazardous levels of indoor air pollution. And it's really hard for the public to wrap their brain around this because we've seen gas stoves in our homes, in our grandparents' homes, in our neighbors' homes for decades, for generations. So it's a really hard concept to understand that there's actually pollution coming from inside our house, from these stoves. So this is important information to get out there. The UCLA researchers modeled using a gas stove for 1 hour and what the health impact of that is. And they found that acute exposures to NO2 from cooking with gas appliances exceeded the levels of national and California-based ambient air quality thresholds in more than 90% of the modeled emission scenarios. That means that in more than 90% of California homes, cooking with gas for 1 hour would exceed outdoor air quality standards. So that's really significant. That's a large number of homes in California. And if you think about it, a common response is, well, what about range hoods? So nearly 70% of California homes use gas for cooking, but less than 35% actually use range hoods, and let alone actually have hood fans that effectively vent pollution outside. So we've seen a lot on the California Building Decarb List and other groups. We've seen pictures of hoods that don't even go outside. They basically vent into the cabinet above the stove. So ventilation is critically important. I don't believe it's the long-term solution for indoor air quality, but it's essential that those who do have a gas stove have a good vent and use it regularly. Let's go to the next slide, please. And then with gas water heaters and furnaces. So gas water heaters and furnaces and other home heating devices are mostly responsible for outdoor air pollution. The UCLA researchers modeled what levels of pollution this is, and it's nearly 16,000 tons of NOx emissions. So just to put this in perspective, because I'm like, okay, what does that even mean? What that means is that it's twice the NOx emissions of all of California's power plants is coming from the gas appliances in people's homes today. Now, when you add in commercial buildings and you add in pollution, I I think when you add in gas appliances in commercial buildings, the NOx emissions shoot up and it becomes on par with the pollution from all of California's light duty vehicles, or 6 times higher than power plants. So again, when people think about outdoor air pollution, they think about cars, they think about power plants. They don't necessarily think about what's in their garage or attic or crawl space. And it's essential that we try to educate the public and educate our policymakers on this, especially in California, which has not complied with federal air quality standards for some time. So this is a very important angle for our policy advocacy. And it's important to remind the public too that the gas appliances in our homes don't have the modern pollution date controls that power plants do. We need to ultimately get rid of power plants as well, but we need to remind policymakers and the public just how dirty these appliances are in our homes. Great, next slide, please. It's also important to look at this with an equity lens and to think about who is being hit the hardest and where. And so UCLA researchers modeled what types of homes, what types of pollution is showing up in different types of homes. So this chart shows an apartment building, a townhouse, and a single family home for NO2. And the red line refers to California's ambient air quality standards, and the blue line is the national standards. And you can see that in all the homes modeled, it exceeds indoor kitchen pollutants, exceed state and national standards. And for apartments, it's much, much higher. So in their modeling, they found that after an hour of cooking on a gas stove, 98% of smaller apartments had peak levels of NO2 that exceeded state and national air quality standards. So in other words, the air quality inside nearly every apartment in California was so bad that it would be illegal if measured outside. So pretty horrible. And sorry, go ahead.
During the COVID crisis, and as people in our lives who died, I'm sure not just me and Amanda, but many of you, like, think about this right here, this serious thing that damages people's lungs, and how disproportionately is that impacting people of color who live in apartments. And just like to understand what's been happening around us, you can point at that gas stove.
Absolutely. Thank you, Sean. I do want to talk about COVID in a little bit too. Let's go to the next slide, please. So the researchers didn't really get to model carbon monoxide. It proved very challenging to do that and to sort of measure the long-term chronic impacts of carbon monoxide. But I did want to address it briefly because of the backdrafting issue. So backdrafting can be caused by depressurization from weather-related forces, from open doors and windows, and other mechanical appliances such as exhaust fans and furnaces. And what this means is that pollution that is supposed to be leaving the house actually gets pushed back into the house. LBNL did some research on this and found that residents living in small apartments with gas wall furnaces are more likely to face backdrafting and unsafe levels of carbon monoxide, as well as unmaintained gas appliances are more likely to improperly vent pollutants outside and push more carbon monoxide into the house. Carbon monoxide poisoning is extremely scary. I listed some of the health effects below, but this is one of the pollutants that can very much lead to death if it's not detected, and also lead to other sustained health impacts. So obviously, if we don't have gas appliances, we're not going to need to have carbon monoxide alarms, and this is not going to be a concern. But this is one of the pollutants that's a lot harder to quantify and to measure. Okay, and next slide, please. So let's talk about vulnerability to pollution from gas appliances and who it really is most vulnerable to Sean's point a moment ago. So first, renters, especially low-income renters who don't have the ability to control what kind of appliances are in their homes and may be living with old and unmaintained and improperly ventilated appliances. So the UCLA report confirms that indoor air pollution is even worse when there's inadequate ventilation from gas stoves and wall furnaces. And studies find that many homes in the US, especially rental units, don't have range hoods or ventilation altogether. So renters are very vulnerable to this. Second is low-income people and people of color. So they're already experiencing cumulative impacts of systematic environmental injustice and racism. and they're most impacted by California's housing crisis and have the least access to healthcare. So additional exposure to pollution from burning gas only makes it harder for them to stay healthy. In addition, the UCLA researchers found that the use of kitchen appliances for supplemental heating, which evidence suggests is more common in low-income and minority households, further increases exposure to unsafe air. And then the third group of people are elderly people. So they typically live in smaller homes where air pollution can become more concentrated, and they're spending more time inside and may have existing conditions that make them more susceptible to health problems from air pollution. They're also less likely to be able to maintain gas appliances over time, putting them at increased risk of higher levels of indoor air pollution. And the last is children. So they have multiple physical attributes that basically increase their vulnerability. And they're particularly susceptible to the negative health effects of air pollution. So they're more active than adults, so they breathe in much more air into their lungs. And children also breathe in air proportionally, more air proportionally to the size of their bodies. And so since the surface area of their lungs relative to their body weight is larger than for adults, this leads to more vulnerability to air pollution. And one study shows that children living in a home with a gas stove are 42% more likely to have asthma than children who don't live in a home with a gas stove. So that is significant and scary and important statistic to bring to people who have a hard time believing that gas stoves are dangerous to our health. Great. So let's take this local and look at what does this mean on the outdoor air pollution side. In addition to the magnitude of the emissions, the UCLA researchers looked at where outdoor air pollution from residential gas appliances is the worst. And they found that it's particularly problematic in air districts that already have some of the poorest air quality. So the South Coast, the SF Bay Area, San Joaquin Valley, and the Sacramento Valley. So this is a really important chart to guide our policy advocacy and our targeting. And we'll talk later about some opportunities at the air districts to tighten NOx regulation on gas appliances. Okay, let's go to the next slide. All right, so I started with all the bad news. Now we're gonna talk about some of the benefits, the good news, the potential benefits of residential electrification. So this is all from the UCLA report still. If all residential gas appliances in California are electrified and use clean energy, the reduction of fine particulate matter, PM 2.5, will result in 354 fewer deaths in a year, nearly 600 fewer cases of acute bronchitis, and over 300 fewer cases of chronic bronchitis. This is equivalent to about 3.5 billion in monetized health benefits. And you can see it broken down by air district as well. I do want to say that the health and the monetary benefits of electrification will only grow as we factor in replacing propane and wood with cleaner electric appliances. And we also talk about electrification of commercial buildings. So this very much is a conservative estimate because it doesn't include other sources, other types of appliances beyond gas, and it doesn't include commercial buildings. Other research is out there, and I can include some links that brings this number into the tens of billions of dollars of benefits from electrification by avoiding health-related damages and premature deaths every year. So now let's go to some of the policy opportunities on the next slide. So we know that we're not going to see these health benefits and these savings without large-scale policy changes that undo the policy bias that favors gas. And we need policy change to ultimately incentivize and then require electrification. So let me briefly share some of the policy opportunities at the local, state, and federal level. Next slide, please. So first, the city, county, and government. So we've seen over 40 cities in California adopt really strong building codes to mandate or incentivize all electric new construction. This is excellent. We want to keep working on this with all of you, especially in Southern California, in the San Joaquin Valley, farther north in California. The Bay Area has been a hub for this, and we definitely want to be expanding it. There's also other opportunities besides these local building codes. We can look at amending franchise agreements. It's exciting. A really cool group of activists in Eugene, Oregon is looking at amending pushing their council to amend the franchise agreement with Northwest Natural, which hasn't been changed in 20 years. So this is something that's live, that's happening in the next month or so. So there could be new tools for us to use at the local level to drive down gas use and to shift towards all electric buildings. Also at the local level could be emission standards for very large existing buildings. And then local government as well has an important role to play in education and outreach to residents and builders and contractors. At the State Public Utilities Commission, and I have California on here a lot. I know there's people on the call from outside of the state. I think a lot of these topics are relevant for other public utility or public service commissions elsewhere as well. Really important opportunities around getting new rebates to lower the upfront costs of going electric, especially for low income. Reforming rates to encourage electrification so we don't penalize it, but people will actually see lower bills. And then really we need to make sure this is going to work for low income communities and renters. So creating new pilot programs to help with low income electrification as well. At the Energy Commission, we have a really important opportunity this year, which many people in the call are already working on, which is updating the statewide building code for the 2022 update. Looking both at new construction and major retrofits should support, and the Sierra Club believes ultimately require electrification. The second is an opportunity around ventilation standards to ensure safe indoor air quality for all new construction and retrofits. Go to the next slide, please. I'll just go quickly because I'm running out of time. The California Air Resources Board has recently become a leader in this building decarbonization work. They passed a resolution late last year related to electrification and pollution from gas. So we have an opportunity now at CARB to establish indoor air pollution guidelines, which can guide the development of policies in other agencies. They're also interested in developing a model NOx rule for gas appliances, which other air districts can use to implement in their air district and in their state implementation plans to comply with the NAAQS, the federal standard on air quality. And the CARB can also, is also going to be updating their greenhouse gas scoping plan this year and voting on it next year. So it's very essential that this year that the plan has very strong GHG reduction targets for the building sector and focuses on electrification, not on RNG. There's also a new opportunity that many advocates are focused on at the air district level, particularly for the South Coast and the Bay Area Air Quality Management District. And this is around developing a zero NOx standard for gas appliances as part of the state implementation plans. So this is obviously focused on air districts that are not complying with national ambient air quality standards and need to create state implementation plans to show how they're going to be reducing their NOx levels. The South Coast already has an ultra low NOx standard, but the idea here is to tighten it more, to shift the market towards all electric, and to create a similar standard in the Bay Area. At the same time, we cannot just be using a stick, we need to be using carrots, especially for low income, and to make sure that low income are able to electrify and are not going to get penalized by these kind of policies. So it's really essential that we also create new rebate programs that are going to help low income folks get these zero emission electric appliances at no cost or at a very low affordable cost. And then lastly, the governor's office and legislators. So assuming there's going to be new stimulus and recovery funding and new programs at the state level, this can include rebates and financing and other types of programs to help low income folks electrify and to also develop new high quality job opportunities. And the governor should also be directing agencies to create these programs to align building policy with the state's larger greenhouse gas and air pollution reduction goals. So these are just a couple of the important opportunities that we all are mostly already working on together around decarbonization and cleaning up the air inside our homes and communities. I do want to take a moment to talk about federal opportunities. On the next slide, please. So we are thrilled to have a new administration and our federal team is working with many other advocates in DC to push the ball forward on building decarbonization and have this be part of the federal platform on climate. We're expecting many executive orders to come out in the next few weeks, including one on federal buildings. And folks are working very hard to include electrification in that, to include that federal buildings do not use fossil fuels, that they be retrofitted, and also that buildings that receive federal funding, like affordable housing, also has a roadmap for getting off of fossil fuels. So that's one thing that folks are working on. There's another opportunity, obviously, at Congress now, in Congress. And these are just some ideas. There, we could do a whole presentation on federal opportunities, calling for hearings on the health and climate impacts of gas, work to increase tax credits for heat pumps and reduce the tax credits for gas. We're not gonna be able to eliminate tax credits for gas appliances, but we can increase the efficiency requirement and also reduce the monetary value of those tax credits. And then third is including electrification and electrification readiness and stimulus recovery legislation. At the DOE, we're finally gonna be moving forward with efficiency standards and appliances. I'm sure you've all seen the executive order that came out yesterday on that. I think this was one around the decarb list, but directing the DOE to move forward on efficiency standards for appliances. But I would say that that is not going to shift the market towards electrification, because they set efficiency standards for each fuel type. So there's an efficiency standard for gas appliances and then an efficiency standard for electric. So it's not necessarily a way to zero out gas appliances, but it could be a way to make them more expensive. At the EPA, one thing that we're really interested in are new hooks. How do we use this health information to regulate gas appliances and to drive them out of the market? So our attorneys are looking into, is there an opportunity within the Clean Air Act with the new source performance standards to push for a NOx standard on gas appliances? So this is all very new. Folks at NYU Law School are also looking into this. And there's a lot of the advocates in California are interested in this as well. So this is something potentially a new opportunity. And then there could be work at other agencies like the Consumer Product Safety Commission and HUD as well. Let's go to the next slide. I realize I am using up my time. So just the connection to COVID, as Sean said, we need to step back into the moment that we're in. Much of our attention and the attention of policymakers is on COVID. And we are seeing a very important connection in the research between air pollution and vulnerability to lung infections like COVID. So it's important to use this data that we're finding on NOx and NO2 to show that as we get exposed to these type of pollutants, we're at the risk of being more vulnerable to COVID as well. So I just wanted to share some of the research here that folks at Emory University have put out. And then lastly, I just want to thank all of you. In my next slide, I listed all of the reviewers who worked with us for over a year on this UCLA report. This was a really hard report to do for me since I don't have a background in public health, and all of you listed here were extremely helpful, volunteering your time to this, and I'm just extremely grateful. Really happy with how it came out, and I just appreciate all the time you all spent with me on the report. So thank you, and I'll open it up to Q&A and comments. We may not have time at this moment, but you're welcome to email me if you want to discuss this more. And I see there's a lot in the chat. I wasn't able to look at the chat while I presented. I'm not good at multitasking, but I can take a look later. And I want to check out this petition. Please add your name to it. And we're using these types of petitions to show public demand for cleaning up air and cutting out gas appliances. So if you can sign on to that, that'd be great.
Well done. Oh, my heart is full, a little bit pained as well because of the sadness of it all. But oh, that's fantastic. Yes, please, there's a whole bunch of comments and questions, etc., over on the side for you, Rachel. Oh, that was a good one. Okay.